When you work closely with a celebrity, it's pretty normal to sign a confidentiality agreement promising that you'll keep what you see and hear to yourself for everyone's protection. But as rapper Sean Diddy Combs sits in a Brooklyn detention center awaiting trial on trafficking and sex crimes charges, his NDAs are getting extra scrutiny. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. All right, so let's talk about NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. These are legal documents that you don't have to even go to law school to know about. A lot of people who aren't even lawyers know what these are. Many celebrities will have employees, vendors, associates sign them to keep them from, blabbing to friends or the tabloids about their personal life. Makes sense, right? Because if they do, there are very serious repercussions. If you sign an NDA and you break it, that is not a place you want to be. It is a way to maintain a little bit of privacy if you are a public figure. But here is the question. What if that celebrity's private life involved criminal activity? Would the rules of an NDA force someone to keep quiet? And that is what we're going to get into as we continue the conversation once again on Sean Diddy Combs. Now, quickly, here are the latest details on Combs, the charges against him. Get you caught up to speed. He is charged with 3 federal counts of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, transportation to engage in prostitution. The government alleges that Combs used fear, coercion, blackmail, violence to rule essentially over a criminal enterprise. And while Combs is alleged to have involvement with illegal guns and drugs, the indictment really focuses mostly on his sexual activities or alleged sexual activities, especially so-called freak-offs. Those are the sometimes hours-long sexual performances that prosecutors say women were allegedly forced to participate in with male sex workers, that Combs would sometimes participate, sometimes watch while he pleasured himself, and sometimes film the whole thing. This is what the indictment alleges. Now, currently, Combs is at the Metropolitan Detention Center, the MDC, out in Brooklyn, New York. In a strange twist, he's in the same area of the jail as Sam Bankman-Fried, the crypto scammer accused of bilking millions from his FTX clients. Now, one of Combs' lawyers told people that Combs, while he's locked up, he's focused, he's very strong. He's also reportedly been able to be visited by family members while he awaits trial. Mark Agnifilo, lead counsel for Combs, recently revealed that his client does not plan to take a plea bargain. He maintains his innocence, plans to fight back at trial, possibly even going as far as to testify in his own defense. I think I could do a whole episode about whether or not he should do that. Now, as a reminder, New York courts, they don't allow recording devices inside the courtroom, so we won't see or hear any such testimony directly. That's why all of the visuals we have so far of Combs in court really consists of renderings done by courtroom sketch artists. That's probably the best we're going to get. Now, Agnifilo also told TMZ for a new documentary that Combs strongly believes that this is a racially motivated prosecution, that he's being targeted because he is a successful black man. Now, when Combs was indicted in mid-September, Agnifilo released this statement, quote, "We are disappointed with the decision to pursue what we believe is an unjust prosecution of Mr. Combs by the U.S. Attorney's Office. He is an imperfect person, but is not a criminal. Please reserve your judgment until you have all the facts. These are the acts of an innocent man with nothing to hide, and he looks forward to clearing his name in court." Hey, talking about NDAs, by the way, those can come up in all sorts of litigation, including personal injury lawsuits. So for that, let me call out Morgan & Morgan, our sponsor and America's largest injury law firm. Look, if you should get injured, you should know they're experts in their field. They have a firm of over 1,000 attorneys. Their clients get a dedicated team of specialists, investigators, paralegals. They have an impressive track record of multi-million-dollar verdicts and settlements. How about one recently? $26 million in Philadelphia. There's no upfront fee. They only get paid if you get paid. The whole process can be done straight from your smartphone. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar, or you can click the link in the description and pinned in the comments. So with that in mind, as we talk about confidentiality agreements that Combs allegedly had people sign, I want to bring in once again a fan favorite of the show. I knew I loved having her on, but all of you guys were so welcoming of her. Elizabeth Vulaj, legal counsel right here at Law&Crime. We took her away from the important work that she has to do to come jump here on Sidebar once again. So good to have you. You had a good time last night.
I did. Yeah, it was great. And thank you for having me on again.
Of course, of course. So, Elizabeth, when we heard about the NDAs and that Sean Combs had people close to him sign, and they're extremely broad, and we're going to get into it. Some have even been called alarming, not normal. But now that Combs has been indicted, we're taking another look at them. But first, I should ask, what should we be thinking about when it comes to celebrities and NDAs? It's a little bit different, right?
Usually, NDAs are pretty commonplace with celebrities and high-profile individuals most of the time because they have people within their purview, usually people that they employ, whether it's household staff, assistants, business associates, that they want to keep certain information that those employees might get access to confidential. So a lot of times with NDAs, with high-profile people, we see, provisions like they're prevented from talking about, the celebrity's personal life, maybe their children. In the business side, maybe they're prevented from disclosing things about the celebrity's company, trade secrets, financial information. So they are actually pretty common, but the thing to keep in mind is that there is sort of a narrow definition of what the person who's signing the NDA can't talk about. In this context, when we talk about the NDAs that have surfaced with P. Diddy, it's a really different scenario. I mean, both you and I have reviewed the NDA, and I will say it's probably one of the most generally drafted NDAs I've ever seen.
Before we get into the specifics, here's the thing. So my dad always talks about this. We host a radio show together called Always in Fashion. Hope everybody can check it out. It's on Spotify, YouTube. Anyway, he always talks about that when there's a negotiation, the power sits with the person who can walk away. These are people who want to have a life. They want to be a part of the celebrity's life, whether it's to be an assistant, whether it's to do business with them, whether it's to attend a party, whatever it is. They don't want to sign it. They're not going to be a part of it. The power rests with Sean Combs. How often would people actually consult a lawyer before signing these NDAs? And how open would a Sean Combs be to any of those NDAs actually being amended?
Yeah, it's a really good point because one, the celebrity or the high profile individual does hold a lot of power in instances. Like you said, a lot of people are presented with this potential opportunity. It's the opportunity of a lifetime. Maybe they want to break into the entertainment industry. So they're more likely to just say, I'll just sign whatever just to be able to get this job. You don't want to be seen as sort of too difficult. Also, the fact remains that hiring an attorney, it costs something, right? So if you have somebody who maybe is fresh out of college, who's just starting their career, they might not have the funds to be able to do that. They might not know an attorney personally. So there's that aspect as well. And also, like you said, the high profile person or celebrity will be seen as having a lot of the power. So if you come to that negotiation and say, can we strike these certain provisions of this? Can we not, agree to this? I think with someone like Combs, who's been proven to really exercise a lot of controlling language in his NDAs, they might not be so open to that.
So now let's get into some of the specifics here. So some of the people who have called themselves victims of Sean Combs and his behavior, they have talked about their own NDAs. According, for example, to a civil complaint filed by Rodney Lil Rod Jones, a music producer who had worked with Combs for a year on his latest album, Love Off the Grid. Combs allegedly forced people who were witnesses to a shooting at a recording studio to sign blanket NDAs. The lawsuit says, quote, upon information and belief a few days before the September 12th, 2022 shooting inside of Chalice Recording Studio, Mr. Combs required all attendees of the CRS shooting to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Mr. Jones did not sign the agreement. A copy of the non-disclosure agreement that a witness who was asked to remain anonymous provided this writer is attached. And we're going to get to that in a second, but a quick recap for you here. So Jones alleges that he was at Chalice Recording Studios when there was a heated argument. Combs allegedly went into a bathroom with his son Justin and one of Justin's friends, referred to only as G. Jones alleges that he heard multiple gunshots, and when Combs and his son came out of the bathroom, G, according to him, was bleeding on the floor. His civil complaint states, quote, Mr. Jones lifted G and brought him to the ambulance at the front of the studio. At this time, Mr. Combs and Justin disappeared to another part of the studio. Mr. Combs gave strict instructions to inform the police that he had nothing to do with the shooting. He also forced Mr. Jones to lie to the police by telling them that G was shot standing outside the studio by a drive-by assailant. And that is also when people were allegedly given NDAs to sign. So I want to talk about the paperwork that Jones' attorney says he got from this anonymous witness. But Elizabeth, this NDA really gets way down into the weeds a little bit, but overall it's basically forbidding the person who signed it from ever saying anything about Combs to anyone ever through any medium, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's one of the things that was really shocking to me to read of this NDA. So basically, again, in a lot of NDAs that we see that are more typical, you see at least some sort of definition of the type of information the person can't disclose, financial secrets, company policies, whatever it might be. But here it says any and all information. So that really could include any and everything, basically. And then you also have language that is trying to extend the person, who's basically prone to the NDA, to not just the person who's signing, but everyone, including people that might have worked for them, their heirs, which was really shocking to read. So it's a really general NDA, and the term of it, which I know we'll talk about, it tries to extend it for a very long time.
One thing that us lawyers love is a long run-on sentence packed with information. Got to get everything in there. So we want to break one of these down for you. So again, this is from the Jones suit. This is a copy of the alleged Standard Combs NDA that he says he got from a witness. We do not know for sure if this is the real NDA, if this is an NDA that people signed, but assuming it is for a minute, assuming this is the real thing, it says, quote, Sean Diddy Combs, aka Puff Daddy's privacy, is highly valued, and all efforts will be made to maintain confidentiality in respect to all information and other material of any kind concerning and or related to directly or indirectly artist and or any person, corporation, or other entity related to or affiliated and or associated with artists personally and professionally, including without limitation family members, relatives, and past or present fiancés, husbands, wives, boyfriends, girlfriends, friends, business associates, except for information or material publicly and intentionally disclosed by artists. Wow. That is a mouthful. What is that even saying?
That is definitely a mouthful, even for a legal document like this. It's, again, really shocking to read something like that. So we have the provision where it says any and all information, which is not typically standard. But then, strangely enough, it doesn't just extend to keeping information confidential about the artist, in this case, Sean Combs, but the person is also agreeing that they can't ever say anything about his business associates, friends, romantic partners, but even past and present. And the past part was really interesting because you could have somebody sign this NDA who may not have ever met any of his former romantic partners before, but they're still being bound to maintain confidentiality about this.
Would a court uphold that?
I don't think this NDA would hold up in court for several reasons. I think the language is extremely broad. In an NDA, you have to have some type of designation as to what to keep confidential and how you have to be reasonable in terms of how far it can stretch. So I don't think this would be upheld.
It's also interesting that by signing this, you are also agreeing that other people will be bound by it too. So in the document, it says, the term you shall include you, your estate, each corporation and or other business entity in which you have an ownership or beneficial interest, and any and all persons and or entities owned and or controlled by you, and or such businesses, for example, affiliates, employees, officers, directors, managers, accountants, and agents, and all your respective heirs, executors, representatives, administrators, employees, licensees, successors, and assigns. I think they got everybody. I mean, have you seen that before?
I have never seen it before. So two things jump out at me with that. The first thing is that it doesn't just extend to, let's say Jones didn't sign the NDA, but anybody within his similar position who might have actually signed it. But then it also extends to any person that could have been employed by the person who signed it, anyone basically belonging to a corporate entity that they owned. So the NDA is being stretched not just to apply to the person who's signing it and Combs, but really any extended employee or business associate of the person signing it, which is really unusual. And then the other thing that jumped out at me is all this language about estate, heirs, successors. That is really an attempt by whoever drafted this to get it to expand to not just during the life of whoever signed it, but to extend also beyond that and have their heirs and estates bound by it, which is really unusual.
Yeah, it's pretty broad, to say the least. And how about this? You mentioned the term. The term of this agreement and duty to keep all information confidential and not use prohibited material shall commence on the first date above and continue for the life of artist plus 20 years or 70 years, whichever is longer. I feel like it's a copyright claim at one point, right?
Yeah, that's 70 years is typically we see in copyright claims. This was also really shocking to read as well. So again, typically with celebrity NDAs, and a lot of NDAs just generally, the term will usually be for however long the person is either working for the celebrity or having that relationship with the celebrity. Maybe you see instances where the term extends after a year after the person's been employed, maybe while they're trying to get another job. Here, it doesn't just last last for the duration of the relationship, but the life of the artist, again, so basically saying however long Combs is alive for, plus decades after. So again, that's something that I've really never seen.
One of the things I'm speculating about is whether this is kind of an emergency NDA, like a Band-Aid. It might not be the standard NDA, as Jones claims, that everyone would sign who was part of Combs' environment. But if something should happen, we got it ready to go. Would that be typical?
Yeah, I mean, it's not typical, but I think this is a very different context from most celebrity NDAs. So what's being alleged here is that, when this shooting apparently occurred in 2022, what Combs allegedly did was basically try to get a number of people that might have either witnessed it or involved to sign this NDA. That might be why the people who drafted it so generally, because they really didn't want anything to get out belonging to this. I would imagine and hope that, in a different context, when it applies to people who might have worked for him, the language would be more specific, but I think that's what happened here.
So now let me ask you the big question. If an NDA is concerning criminal conduct, whether it's the shooting or whether it's sex trafficking or whether it is forcing people to be a part of freak-offs using threats or violence or coercion of some kind, and there's commercial sex workers, would an NDA prohibit those people from cooperating with the government, from speaking about what's happening, from testifying at trial?
No, it typically wouldn't. So NDAs can't be used to essentially prohibit a person from disclosing or discussing criminal activity. So that applies whether you're an actual victim and survivor of that criminal activity, or even if you've witnessed something. So let's say, a person who's signing an NDA might have witnessed, embezzlement or bribery going on. They still wouldn't be prohibited from talking about it, because there's a whole public policy argument around NDAs that you don't want to use it to essentially silence people from being able to talk about illegal activities. So, the thing with the freak-offs is what's being alleged is elements of trafficking, transportation of sex workers, a lot of illegal activity. So I don't think that NDAs would uphold that.
And here's the important note. A freak-off, assuming it wasn't coerced, assuming everybody wanted to be there, it wouldn't be illegal, right? So somebody could sign an NDA about a freak-off and they would be prohibited from talking about what happened.
Yeah, I think that would be a different context. So
assuming there's no prostitution.
Correct, right. So assuming that there's no illegal activity involved, let's say it's a group of consenting adults behind closed doors, there's no illegal activity going on there. I think then the NDA might be a little bit more enforceable because there's no potential criminal activity going on. But what's being alleged with the freak-offs, what we saw in Cassandra Ventura's complaint was, different elements. Again, transportation, allegations of people being influenced by narcotics and being coerced into things that they don't want to do. That, I think the NDA would not uphold.
Talking about Cassandra Ventura, who was the first person to file a lawsuit against Sean Combs back in November of 2023, started this whole ball rolling. If she settled her claim for sexual assault, battery, sex trafficking, if she signed an NDA as part of that settlement, would she be prohibited again from working with the government, from testifying against Combs?
I would be really surprised. I'm sure, so she settled her claim very shortly after she filed her complaint. I'm sure there's some sort of provision in her settlement agreement that says, she might not be able to discuss specific terms of the agreement, maybe disclose monetary sums related to the agreement. But I would be really surprised if there was a provision that prevented her from speaking about it generally. Again, you can't use any sort of NDA, whether it's a full NDA or even a clause in an agreement, to prevent someone from talking about criminal activity. And also the fact is that, there are recent laws that have been put in place to protect instances like this. So there's the Speak Out Act, which was signed by President Biden in 2022, which essentially tries to invalidate NDAs when it comes to allegations of sexual assault, instances like that. And one of Cassie's allegations is sexual assault. So I would be really shocked if there was some sort of provision in her settlement agreement that says she can't talk about it at all.
And also it was already out there. She already filed that complaint with all these allegations, as is. Another one of Combs' associates to talk about the agreements is Aubrey O'Day. So she was part of the musical group Danity Kane that Combs helped to form on MTV's Making the Band. And she has said in recent years that she was fired from the group by Combs because she wasn't willing to do what was expected of her, not regarding her talent, but in other areas. And she claims that when she was part of the group, Combs had wanted her to sign an NDA in exchange for the group's publishing rights. She told the podcast only stands, quote, I have to release him for any claims or wrongdoings or actions prior to the date of the release. I have to sign an NDA that I will never disparage Puff, Bad Boy, Janice Combs, or Justin Combs' music, or EMI, or Sony ever in public. O'Day has not released the exact details or copies of her NDA or supposed NDA, but in response to that interview, Combs' team released this statement to TMZ. Aubrey O'Day got her big break because Diddy and Bad Boy cast her in their show with her group, Danity Kane. Last year, when he reassigned his portion of the publishing to Bad Boy artists, an unprecedented move within the industry and which he did not have to do, not all artists signed an NDA, contrary to what she claims. So Elizabeth, look, I don't know if she knows the fine details of it. She might be saying exactly how it is, but what were your initial impressions of that?
Yeah, my initial impressions were, again, not surprising. This seems like an ongoing pattern by Combs to try to exert, controlling language within the NDAs and what people can and cannot say. But you can't use an NDA to essentially obtain rights to somebody's work or, livelihood, essentially. So when allegations like that were made, again, it was surprising in one instance, but also seeing the ongoing pattern of what's being alleged about Combs, not really as much.
Well, Elizabeth, I think we have a much better understanding of the NDAs and their role that they may or may not play in this case against Sean Combs. And I think everybody can tell how lucky we are to have Elizabeth as our general counsel, getting us out of trouble if we ever do. But I've taken you from work for far too long. So I'm going to let you go back. Thank you so much. You were terrific as always.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.